All right, everyone, welcome to this evening's event. I really appreciate you joining us. We are here for a conversation with LGBT Olim on Family Day. We're a couple of days late. Family Day was, in fact, on Friday the 12th of February this year. And it's Valentine's Day instead, but sorry about that. I thought it would be a nice opportunity for us to talk to a couple of Olim who have built families in so-called non-traditional ways. So we've got with us tonight Taryn, who has a beautiful baby boy with her wife through sperm donation. And we also have Alon, who has two children through co-parenting. I was hoping to have someone here that would talk about surrogacy. We'll talk about surrogacy at the end. Please don't let me forget about that, because that's quite an interesting topic right now. Things are in flux. So let me introduce everyone. So Taryn, if you'd like to just give us a short introduction, and then we'll talk to Alon.
Okay, hi, Taryn from South Africa. I've been in Israel for close to 13 years. As you mentioned, we have a gorgeous family. We pretty much built our family, from being in Israel. We didn't live somewhere else before. I made Aliyah, met my wife Yael. We got married, and then as the story goes, and actually I can share now the happy news. As of this month, we can say that we're expecting another child. Not I won't be giving birth yet. Elle will be giving birth this time, and it's nice to sort of be standing on the the other side of the story, enjoying this whole thing, but not physically having to go through with it again. So it was a wonderful experience, but it's really different on this side of the story. And that's it.
Lovely. Yeah. We'll come back to you in a second. Alon, hello. Tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Alon. I'm also from South Africa. I've been in Israel close to 30 years, and have been with Giddy, my husband, for 20 years. And we have kids who we share with the birth mother and their twins who are 11 years old. Yeah.
Fantastic. And so all of you are living in Tel Aviv, is that correct?
Correct.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, let's start with Taryn. Tell us a little bit about the process, why you decided to take that particular route, and a few of the details, please.
Sure. So quite funnily enough, we had a friend who had offered to help us grow our family. We weren't interested really to sort of share our experience outside of our marriage. We wanted to create our own sort of nucleus. And but when that offer did come up, we looked into it, and one of the things we learned is that if we were to agree to use a sperm donor of a known person in Israel, there is no way in Israel for a father. I don't know what it is now. I speak, our son Itai is 2.5. So I only speak previously. The father cannot give up his fathership, basically. He can't say, no, I just wanted to donate my sperm and here you go, mazel tov. His name would be on the child's Teudat Zehut, and forever he would be connected. Not only legally, it brings him into the family, and I think that's wonderful for people who want to co-parent. And I think it's a special thing. We have very close friends. Ironically, the friends who had offered, they are co-parenting in their own family. Our friend's husband has also, he had a child with another lady, and then now they're all part of that family. But we realized that that's not something we wanted to do. So we looked into options, and it was quite straightforward. We looked into sperm banks in Israel that work, all sperm banks in general. I don't know what it's like abroad, but you can choose, a donor from Israel or abroad. And the two main options for Israelis, for abroad, are the US, mostly in California, New York, and Denmark. Again, at least that was when we were. And there were two main places, Cryobank and Asuta Hospital. We checked into both. There's good and bad to say about both. We won't go into that now. That's something else, and that's for everyone's experience. But basically, we chose Cryobank, and it's basically literally like a bank. You sign up with them, but none of the work is really on their side. They have a system. They provide us entry to find out, all information of the donors. And through that, you enter, you choose, and you let them know, and then they get in touch with the bank, and you basically pay to fly over the sperm, and then you pay rent until you use it. And then you pay rent pretty much every month. And then it's quite it's like a funny thing, because it's a little bit ridiculous. It could be a lot more simple, but as far as it goes in Israel, it's pretty simple. And when you are ready, everything is through the Kupat Cholim. So we moved from Maccabi to Clalit. Again, everything is personal and based on family experiences. As far as family stuff, that we thought Clalit was the best place to go for it, and it's proven very true. And that's it. And then just like you would if we were any other couple going through insemination or IVF, because you start off first with insemination, the process is exactly the same for any couple in Israel. Any couple. The amount of people that I know that we met, at the Kupa, every few days you go for tests. And that's it. And you have a schedule and you follow that, and that's between you and your doctor and the nurse. The nurse is at the Kupa. And on the day that they tell you to come back, you fill out a form, you go pick up the stuff, you bring it to the Kupa, and that's pretty much it. As far as that's a very rough sort of explanation, but the process is very, very straightforward. I think the best advice I ever got was in choosing the donor is probably the hardest. And the best advice I got was from a friend who had gone through it herself. And she said at a certain stage, just let go, just let go. You can't control that much. But I will say, I think for this forum, one of the most important things was what was the difference between choosing an Israeli donor versus an international? Why did we do that? So two pretty big reasons, no, three actually. So I'm from South Africa. So it was very important for me to take genetic tests, and one of them to include Tay-Sachs. Tay-Sachs is it's common for South African juries. So that's something that was not even a question I had to do. And in Israel, there's a very small amount, at least when we tried, a very small amount of donors who have had those genetic tests on their side. So we need that the donor and myself would have done the same tests. That was one big reason for us. That was actually a yes or no. So that could have been enough for us just to choose abroad. The second reason is that also abroad, we found that they did far more genetic testing than they did in Israel. I don't know if that's true to today. That was less important to us. Tay-Sachs was the big sort of flag. And the other very, very important decision was obviously the legal stuff that, if it's in Israel, you are afforded less information on the donor. You have all the same biological information, but it's all on paper. The extras, what we were allowed to understand from the international options, we received a voice recording of the donor, which funnily enough actually sort of makes a difference. You also see they've written a letter, you see their handwriting, not to go, we weren't crazy about it, but it creates a sense that there's a real person behind there, and you actually know, how they speak, and you sort of hear between, it was an interesting thing for us. You go with sort of a gut response. We said, just as if I was choosing a partner to have a child with, if it was to be a guy, there was something in that sort of, similarity, something common. And so yeah, we found that there were a lot more things. One of them was also is that we wanted the option that from 16 years and up, if the bank is still around and if everything, if one of our children would be interested to find out, we wanted an open donation. We wanted them to open donation doesn't actually really mean open. It means that we can request that the donor has, before they even donated, agreed that they would, that they would allow, they'd be interested in contact. But in the, let's say 16 years between now and then, they can change their minds, but it is open. There is an option. In Israel, unequivocally, the privacy of the donor, which is actually a wonderful thing, unequivocally, the privacy of the donor is kept private, 100% private, and you know a lot less about just genetics is the same, but there are other elements that you know less. Mostly, what we were told in a very Israeli way was, don't worry, it's all okay. But we're choosing a sperm donor. I need to know the details. But personally, we didn't really go down, and we just looked generally, height, eye color is not a thing. So we didn't really go into like the crazy details, but mostly health, genetics, and then also just a general idea. You're creating a little person, and you do want that child to be a part of our family, and perhaps look like someone in the family, to whatever degree that means. We're not really playing God, but it was important. It was important. So that, and that's it. But the conversation also, sort of happens before. Who's going to go first? I think those are the interesting parts of the conversation. The bureaucratic sort of logistical stuff was relatively easy. You find a bank, you sign up to the bank, you find a donor, you go to your kupa, and you start the process just like anyone else. But I think the conversations for us, at least, just like in our marriage, I suppose, everything needs to, it's the 80-20 rule. You got to plan 80%, and 20% is the bitsua, the actual action. So to understand what kind of family we want in general, I think those are all the big topics that come beforehand. So that's it. And then once I gave birth, in the hospital, so as I mentioned earlier, before we started this call, we had a little bit of a chat beforehand. So there was just two, as far as the legal, if you want to keep it separate, but as far as the legal aspect, just like any parent in the hospital, your baby's a day or two old, you take them to a room, you sign that you're the parent, you write your name. We had tried, there was sort of going around in the community an option before, while I was pregnant, that perhaps Yael could adopt Itai, that he could be written on, on his Teudat Zot and on hers before he was born. It turns out, cutting a long story short, it fluctuated. It was in the news a lot 2.5 years ago. It was quite a big thing. Some people succeeded, not really, I think 1 or 2, and then it wasn't really true. They didn't. We tried as well, and it clearly wasn't a thing, but it wasn't an issue. I gave birth, and what we had to do is, fill out the forms just like anyone else. And instead of where it says father, literally the nurse just crosses out the name father, writes, second mom, and her details. And then they said, don't worry, they send it to Ms. Radapnim. You need to fill out whatever form, speak to your lawyer about it, and everything will be fine. And that's exactly what we did. We got the name of a lawyer that was dealing with that topic at that time, and that would be the best advice. Just someone or someone the lawyer who we went to when we got married happens to be a very good friend or family member of a friend of ours who deals in the topic of gay marriage in Israel. So always just find the person who's got their finger on the pulse. We went to this lawyer, very small fee. They filled out whatever forms. And if I remember, I don't think we even thought about it. We had brought home this cute little boy. It sort of sits in the back of your mind, but we didn't think about it. And I remember when he was about three months old, we literally got a registered post, open it up, and there's a certificate and says, Mazel Tov, you're both moms. And then we were advised by our lawyer, the same lawyer, just take out a passport. And we went and we took out passports for all of us. And that's it. And then the real work starts. So
that brings up a good point, because I think once it's very difficult to get birth certificates and passports changed, isn't it? So the fact that you got that done, I think you froze them for a second. Oh, there you're back. So the fact that you got that done straight away was a good move.
Yeah. It's very, I think that, I don't think it's because we live in Tel Aviv. I think Israel in general, it's sort of a paradox. They wave the flag of support for the LGBT, but not really. But in the ways that they do, this was very, we weren't the first couple, and we certainly won't be the last. And So yeah, we didn't have really any concerns. I think the best thing we did is that we went to the right people, or there can be a lot of people that can be the right people. But as I said, there's tons of forums to ask. To be very honest, I was too busy being pregnant to think about all these things. And of course it was stuff that was important, but I think to have a supportive partner in any pregnancy, in any sort of birth, is the most important thing. Someone to think clearly while you aren't. So I think a lot of that fell on Yael, but again, you know, the way she explains is very, very, very simple. And even now, I mean, there's nothing we need to do really. That's it. Itai is, you know, our child, and he's a monster. So he's a sweet little boy, but he's a 2.5-year-old. So you can imagine, he's adorable. That's, yeah. As I said, the hard work is now.
So before we move on to Alon, I just wanted to ask you, have there been any issues? You know, before we started the chat, you talked about kindergarten.
Yes, not at all. And again, it's hard to say. We live in Tel Aviv, but we don't necessarily belong to a community. As much as I've tried, you know, all the years, we don't necessarily belong to an LGBT community. So there wasn't, we didn't go to a gun that we knew that there'd be a good amount of you know, families similar to ours. We actually ended up at his first gun at the age of 4 months. His first gun close to Dizengoff Center. It's literally a street away, so we're in the heart of Tel Aviv, with a Haredi ganenet, and we were the only you know, gay identifying family, and they were fantastic. And I think that's mostly a sensibility of the Merkaz. I don't think it's Tel Aviv exclusively, and I would hope it would be, you know, elsewhere. We plan also to move out of Tel Aviv this coming year once we have another baby, and we've heard things, you know, as far as even Netanya, right? Not that it's that far away, but I'm a Tel Avivian, so Netanya is far for us. We plan to go closer to that area, and it's the same situation. So it's happy. It sort of gave us quite a good feeling knowing that, you know, at least every time there was a gift that was sent for Abba and Ima, we got one for Ima and Ima. Yael and I presented, like all parents, each one of us got time to present something to the kids. So she and I went to the school and presented something on animals. So there's absolutely there's no differentiation, absolutely not. And I have heard stories, of course, there's always, you know, an individual experience. There seems to be, and now that we're luckily going to have another child, we have no reservations, we have no, you know, no concerns. It's quite straightforward. Ironically, as much as there's no law in place to safeguard LGBT families, the way it actually works, at least for women, you know, same-sex couples, it's pretty straightforward and it's very recognized. So I'm very appreciative of that. I think it's only looking back now, once everything's pretty calm and we're in the midst of really parenting, do we realize how, had that not gone the way that we experienced, I can't imagine, because there's a lot more, as I said, the real work really is when you are parenting, and to think, you know, how to parent together. Yeah, but pretty much also the fact that, you know, Itai is sort of, he's woven into our families, you know, Yael's family, my family, you know, as if literally we both gave birth to him. And ironically, the nature-nurture debate, he's exactly like Yael. He just looks exactly like me, but he's her. So that's another interesting conversation. So
that's wonderful. Thanks very much, Taryn. I really appreciate that. Let's move on to Alon. So Alon, tell us about your situation. How did you choose?
Okay. My situation, I think, is very, very different to what you just heard. When we first started having the discussion about having kids 14 years ago, there was nothing. It was all very, very grassroots. There were people who come out of the closet and had kids with their wives or their husbands. And it was something that was fairly new. So when we first started looking into having kids, we first looked at the issue of adoption, which was the thing that we'd heard about. And we looked at South America, we looked into Russia, we looked into South Africa, because I'm from South Africa. And it was at that stage where various countries stopped allowing adoption to Israel because of religious reasons. And suddenly was a wave of antagonism, but there was something going on where they felt that it was not right that the babies were being adopted and then their religion was being changed, because the babies would have to then become Israeli in Israel. And the doors of various places, which was here and there was okay, suddenly closed. So we then looked into surrogacy, which was also in its green roots, at its grassroots level. And it was, again, there were very few couples that we knew who had thought about surrogacy. We found a group on Facebook where there were various couples who were at the same stage. We thought it would be important to join, not only to get information, but also that the kids would have other kids who would be in similar circumstances that would have two gay parents, where they would be able to socialize and identify with two gay dads. And then through circumstances, we started looking into co-parenting, which suited us, I think, a little bit more. The children's mother was a friend of ours, and she agreed to co-parent with us. We went to a lawyer. We had an agreement drawn up both between my husband and myself and between us as a couple and the mother. And the issue that came up is that because it's Israel, where does the non-biological parent fit in? Because there are three parents, and in Israeli law, you can only have a mother or a father, or a mother and a mother, or a father and a father today. Back then, it was a mother or a father. There was no real understanding of something else. And that was something that had to be thought through in terms of where the non-biological parent, what part of the non-biological parent be. Both my husband and I, Gideon and I, wanted both of us to be active parents. And therefore, when the kids were born, I was included as an active parent, although it was not although I had no legal recompense because I was not really a parent under Israeli law. In the agreement that we had with the mother, it was agreed that if something, had to happen to Giddy or to her, that I would take over, and the court would hopefully approve that I would take over as legal guardian for the children. But it was early days, and I don't think that there is any legal, until today, any legal way for a couple or to have three parents. We continued meeting with the people who were undergoing or thinking about surrogacy. And it was very interesting to see that at the same time that we were having our kids and meeting with the couples who were looking at surrogacy, the laws were changing in Israel slightly. There was suddenly it opened up around about the same time, and what was not considered to be the norms suddenly became the norms. More and more couples decided on surrogacy. We looked at the issues that were relevant to us as well. One of the issues that we decided not to go with the surrogacy was the issue of conversion, where the child that is born through surrogacy is not considered to be Jewish and has to undergo conversion a couple of months after the birth of the child. And that raises issues in terms of, how do you convert a child that's a newborn child? Suddenly you take, do we do this for the sake of going to a religious rabbi and doing an ordinary conversion, which is very difficult and changing our lives? There's a kind of a contradiction here. Or do we go to a reform conversion, which also has problems because that also may not be recognized. And therefore, when the kids grow up, they have to then convert again, and perhaps their weddings and other things may not be recognized. So that was an issue that I think we thought about long and hard when we were deciding, and we were talking to various people that were thinking about surrogacy. And it was one of the reasons why we decided to go under the co-parenting route. In terms of the the kids being at nursery school, there was never any kind of issue. The Galanot and the parents and our friends, etc., there was never an issue in terms of who we were. In terms of the kids' identity, that's how they grew up. They also, I don't think, until today, don't see anything strange in it. There's never been any of the hazards that people warn about kids being teased, and having two fathers or having three parents. Has never ever come up. The most conflict I think the kids have had is in terms of the language, which I think, in terms of Olim is also important. What do how do you speak to them? How do they communicate? They're living in Israel, they need to know Hebrew, but also there are parents who live in perhaps another country, or Anglo-Saxon, French, I don't know, Spanish, whatever it is, and that becomes actually more of an issue sometimes than other things. The kids have never heard of the word, the kids have never heard of the word daddy. They had no idea what daddy meant. And even today, some of the friends of the kids come and say, "Hello, daddy, how are you?" Because they don't really know what the word means. They've never heard the word. And it was only until the kids were 5 or 6 or 7 when they started hearing things on TV, they kind of understood what the word daddy was, although I was always daddy to them. So it's something to think about, and something that's really, really interesting in terms of the issue of language and language acquisition is who is who? Are you Abba and Daddy? Are you Abba 1 and Abba 2? Are you Abba Alon and Abba Gidi? Are you Daddy Alon and Daddy Gidi? Because I think that is important. It's something that's not really thought about because it's taken for granted. And it's something that was an issue when they were much younger, because they had no clue what this daddy was. Which for me was quite difficult, because suddenly my position in the family was weird, because I knew what I was, but they didn't know what I was. They'd never heard this daddy word. So that's in terms of co-parenting. Another thing which I think is important to consider and to think about is also, what is the nuclear family? Is the nuclear family me and my husband and the kids, or is it me and my husband and the mother and the kids? And that's something that I think that is not always thought through. There's, I think, a well-intentioned, as the family, you'd like to do things together, but where do you draw the line between the two parents, myself and my husband and the kids, and the co-parent? Where, what is her role? Where does she fit in? Is it something that's open? We do everything together? Are there things that we do separately? When they were younger, I think it's less of an issue, but as they grow older and the kids become more independent and their relationship with their parents becomes different, it's also something that needs to be thought about and discussed. And hopefully that the communication between the parents and amongst everybody should be very, very clear, that it's clear who is where, and that you're all parents, but that the family is perhaps a nuclear family, but also there's the kids' relationship with their mother and her family, and the kids' relationship with the two parents and our families. And that perhaps becomes sometimes a little bit more complicated, and has to be steered in a way that is of benefit to everybody.
So how does it work around, things like Chagim? Do you all get together?
Well, conveniently, I have no family in Israel, and my husband also has no family in Israel. So luckily enough, and this is one of the good things, the mother's family have kind of also adopted us. And therefore, we're invited to many of the, Rosh Hashanah and Pesach. They'd like to see us more, but they're not our family. They are, but they're not. So, do we go it becomes an issue. Do we go every Friday night? How many Friday nights do we go? We don't insult anybody, but how much do we include them in our lives, because they are, but they're not our family? The issue of family, I think, is dynamic. And therefore, we tend to go, in the last couple of years, it's kind of even itself, Rosh Hashanah and Pesach, and we go to them. And if there's a birthday, etc., then we go to them, and then we invite them for one of the chagim to us, Sukkot or what are the other chagim, minor chagim. They get invited to us so that we can reciprocate and have them at us for dinner to celebrate together. But it's something that I think is, could be potentially problematic if it's not worked out and spoken through. And it doesn't have to be a decision, but if it's not communicated effectively, it could be potentially hazardous for families that haven't thought it through.
Excellent. Yeah. I can imagine, I mean, with 3 parents, it's hard enough sometimes to make decisions for the children when there's 2 parents involved. Having a 3rd parent involved, I think things have become more complicated, as you said.
Yeah, I think it's easier because, I have no family and Giddy has no family here in Israel. So it's kind of this, the solution is easy because, that's the solution. We go to the mother's family. If there was, if I had extended family here, or, my parents were here and Giddy's parents were here, then it would be considerably more problematic as to where to go for which chag. So we still have, there's a trip to South Africa, there's a trip to New York. So that also has to be worked out, once a year, as well as a family holiday. So.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
If I can just say,
sure.
So if I can just say on that point that it's so true, and on what you're saying, because we, most of sort of the hard stuff before Itai was born was deciding who actually goes first on our end, and it's not something trivial, and it wasn't something we both want to physically experience having kids, and we want to have kids with each other, and for us, just to share a little bit, one of the main reason, and this is after a lot of thought. I also don't have family now. Slowly, I have more family in Israel, but at the beginning, not so much. And it's predominantly her family, and they love us, and to whatever degree a family is accepting. But again, like you say, they're not my family. And what was really, really important is that Itai sort of, he blends into the families as if, we were a husband and a wife, and the child comes equally from both of us. So we decided, I was happy to go first as well. But that was actually one of the biggest reasons. So it wouldn't be a case of my child, Yael's child. And I'm so happy because Itai, you should see it. He looks like this little blonde kid who looks nothing like the rest of his cousins. And it doesn't matter, but there is, it's an element to it. And he's 100% exactly like all of his cousins. There wasn't even a thought. And I think especially for Yael's parents to really bring us in as a couple, and to bring Itai in, and ironically, Itai has twice a week where it's like, we go there very often, they live really close to us, but twice a week where it's just his time with them, and they're completely obsessed, completely, and it's amazing. And what's a relief for me, and I say relief, is that now that when Yael gives birth, and she is the oldest, so it's going to be a pretty big thing in their family, that it won't be a case of, so Itai is like yours and this other child is hers. So it's part of really bringing the family together. And it's far more complex, the psychological nuance of just merging any 2 families. But I think families such as ours that we experience, it's a little bit more on the surface, these topics. And we decided just to deal with each one of them really head on and really think about it. And then, as I said, all the bureaucratic stuff, Israel will support or not support LGBT families. We have no control in that, but we can do, we can control how our families are. So
I think there's more openness today in terms of the concept of family. And I think that certainly helps. Is that there are single mothers and there are single fathers, and there, a lot of families are doing surrogacy at the moment. Which is great, and I think there's a lot more on the spectrum of parenting, on the spectrum of family, than there was even 5 or 10 years ago. Even myself, in terms of working in education, it was always like the source of gossip. This one, there was like one in a shikva. This one would, this one has 2 parents, or this 2 fathers, or this one has 2 mothers, and it was like a source of gossip. Whereas today it's just, it's nothing. And I think that's a very, very positive move. That, you know, you can be whoever you want to be. Certainly in the center of the country. And I think with outside the center of the country, I think it's also less of an issue because there's much more exposure. People see a lot more on TV, and there's a lot more in terms of in actuality, you know, actuality shows. So there's a lot more openness than darkness as there was, you know, a couple of years ago. And I think it's very, very positive. It's a very good thing.
Yeah. So before we open up for questions, I just wanted to have a quick chat about surrogacy, because you mentioned surrogacy. Well, the situation with surrogacy in Israel is a little bit complicated. The laws changed, I think it was 3 years ago, when the government brought in new legislation, which they had been told should not discriminate. And of course, they brought in legislation that did discriminate. So currently in Israel, surrogacy is available for straight couples and single women, and not available to single men or to gay couples. That's my understanding. Just over a year ago, the Supreme Court ruled, so someone took the government through the court system, and the Supreme Court basically gave the government a year to change the laws to remove the discrimination. And if they didn't do that within the year, then the Supreme Court would do something about it. So that year has now passed. And my understanding is that there are now a couple of people, again, raising this with the Supreme Court. So the idea now is that because the government hasn't acted and because the discrimination is still in place, the Supreme Court will enact some kind of order, this is the hope, that will basically strike the discrimination from the law, and that will hopefully open up surrogacy to, you know, to single men and to gay couples as well. That's the hope. We just have to wait for the process to take place, I guess.
My knowledge of I think most of the surrogacy is done abroad. It's very expensive. And I think it's sad that has to, you know, that is the way that it has to be at the moment.
Absolutely, it is incredibly expensive. And again, the number of countries that used to be, you know, that are available, where surrogacy is available, has dropped. You know, I know people that used to go to India, Cambodia, I think Thailand, and so on. I believe now it's only the US and Canada. Canada has altruistic surrogacy, so the costs are lower there. But again, it all depends who you talk to. And again, there are these fairs every year or multiple times a year aimed at gay couples, where all of these agencies come over and they talk to people about, you know, the options and so on. But again, the costs are prohibitive for most. Again, this is one of the reasons I was hoping to have someone here talk about their surrogacy process, but I have discovered that very, very few Olim have been through the process. Whereas I know a number of you know, native Israelis who have been through the process, and often it's a case of, it's like, well, do we want to buy an apartment or do we want to have a child? Those are the kinds of decisions that need to be made. So hopefully this time next year, yeah, absolutely. So hopefully this time next year we'll have a different situation. And I know there are, you know, people that are starting the process now internationally, but it's, you know, it's complicated and it all takes time. And it would be so much easier potentially if we could do that locally instead. All right. So I just wanted to ask if anyone has any questions, please raise your hand or unmute yourselves if you have any questions. This is the bit where it suddenly goes deathly quiet for a short while. Or have we answered all of the possible questions that you might have had? No? Fine. All right. Okay. All right. Wonderful. So let me know if you have, if you don't want to talk, you're more than welcome to type into the chat window instead as well. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Are there any final words that either of you would like to add before we sign off, if there aren't any questions?
No, just good luck. Just good luck to anyone who's, yeah, who's building a family, in any type of family, you know. yeah, just good luck. And there's, I think, exactly what Alon had said, that now there's a lot more support everywhere, and there's a million forums. Now the difficulty is choosing between the forums and to ask people for advice, and you know, but yeah, just really good luck in it. I think it's if you want to, you know, it's not an easy thing. And I think for any family, and what we're learning, you know, with our friends who are not necessarily part of the LGBT community, they you know, having a child in Israel at a certain age, it's difficult for everyone, you know. So everyone's sort of in it. At a certain stage, when you're at the Kupat Cholim, you know, you're giving birth just like everyone else. There's no difference. So that's it. Just look after your own families. But I saw there was a question. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. How much? A lot. A lot. It's, let's say, it's like if you do surrogacy, it's like buying a house. So if you, for us, it was like buying a few cars, not a house. So it's a lot cheaper, right? It's a lot cheaper. I don't know numbers exactly, but as I said, it's a little bit ridiculous. You pay rent for the sperm. So what you do is you pay for it to be delivered. So you fly it over. At one stage we joked and we said it would be more worth it for us to go for a holiday to the US and then bring it back ourselves, and you're not allowed to, obviously. But yeah, no, so yeah, you pay, it's realistically, it's in the 20,000s of shekels, 20 to maybe 40, but this again was 2.5 years ago. It's a lot, it's quite subsidized because, sorry, there's dogs on Dizengoff. It's quite subsidized in a lot of respects because it's through the kupa, basically. The bulk of the money is exactly for the sperm. And also you want to make sure, you know, they have, what's wonderful to know is that the actual world of sperm donation is that a person cannot donate endlessly. They also have to be the seriousness to the type of person. We always thought it was, you know, it is students usually and a lot younger people, but there is a lot of things that they have to go through. So they, from what we understand, the donor receives quite a good amount of money for donating. And that's sort of, you know, it makes sense then how much we pay sort of on our end to receive it as well. So it was pretty good. Yeah. But in Israel, what it costs to keep it here, that just seems like a little bit cheated out of a little bit of money, but it's but you go with it and it's fine. But yeah, I would say in the 20s, at least that's what it was. I don't think it will go, if anything, it should get cheaper and cheaper every year. There's no reason.
How long were you paying rent for? How long did it take once it had arrived for the wheels to start turning?
So pretty quickly though. It takes from the time you decide, they deliver it within a week. It's like express mail, but it has to obviously be in line with what your your schedule is and what your doctor says, and how many times. I mean, that's was a misconception. I thought also that with donation, I thought that was like a thing. It's a different conversation for a different time. But no, it's just, it's not. If you're healthy and under a certain age, the consideration between IVF and sort of the regular, it's called IUI, is just how many donations do you have at your disposal? And for us, it was actually, we're getting pretty close to we really wanted another child that will be from the same donor for many reasons, and mostly for Itai. But you know, there's only so many. So we, you know, you spend more money to bring and to keep, and we actually, you know, you think like at a certain stage. So yeah, it's a lot of money. I think you have to have. It's an investment, but it's not. I feel bad even talking about it, because when you speak about surrogacy, and I've had friends who've done it, before even thinking about the topic, you're 200,000 shekels in debt. Before even thinking about it, and ours didn't even get close. It's not even 10% of it. I mean, no, it was just over maybe 15, 20% of that. So it's not the same. Yeah. But yeah, it's let's just say I take my hat off to single moms who go through the process. If you're not financially, you know, capable, because again, the child gets born, and then for the next few years, you pay for gun. I think there's there's like a lot going on, but yeah, I think we're just fortunate. So what is an interesting thing for a different talk is the South Africanness, the South African representation here, which is really interesting. And I've said it before on previous events that there's an interesting topic there. South Africans coming to Israel and building their families.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Really good point.
I agree with that.
All right. Excellent. So let's wrap it up. I just wanted to let everyone know. So thanks everyone to everyone for joining us this evening. We are planning to upload this onto the Facebook page, so you can go to Facebook and search for LGBT Olim, and also we'll find a place for it on the LGBT Olim website as well. That is basically it for this evening. So thank you very much for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. Thank you very much to Taryn and Alon for coming as well and talking about their lives.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks very much.
Bye.